Hello folks and welcome to Gotham City Knights. This video will be a Batman Miniatures Game of 3rd Edition Battle Report. This is our 9th Battle Report video, and once again, maybe not so much down to COVID-19 restrictions, but due to the social distancing required at local clubs, this has been played on Tabletop Simulator. We here at Gotham City Knights seek to not just show you how our games play out, but also give you the insight to our strategic and tactical thinking throughout. My name is Kaios, and my opponent, as always, is Salandra. And today, I'm taking a second look on the battle reports into the Organised Crime crew with the newer releases. And Salandra is taking another team, now a different team this time, in the Team Arrow. Let's look at the lists. Looking at Team Arrow first. Team Arrow is not a team that currently gets any benefits during recruitment, not like Teen Titans or Suicide Squad or any of those. They just get the normal 350 rep and 1,500 funding. So Salandra was then forced to try and fit in a list. She'd always struggled to maybe make a list that had more than 4 characters, but seemed to find one this time round. Took the Dark Knight Rises of Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, the leader that was released with the Dark Knight Rises, Carrie Kelly, in 3rd edition. 75 rep does enough, but the most important thing is that the Oliver Queen is the always boss for the Team Arrow team, meaning he can inspire free agent sidekicks and everyone alike. Now, filling out the team, Huntress and Black Canary from the Birds of Prey movie, the box set. They both come with their own character cards and are very strong independent pieces that can put a lot of damage down, but also have that very important acrobat for getting around the board, undercover to get you deep in deployment and starting putting out suspects. Captain Cold. Captain Cold is a pet of mine. I really like all that he brings to the list. You know, he brings an extra resource point. He brings a +1 to take the lead role every turn. Just has a lot of uses for all of his actions. Good gun, great special in order, for example. He just brings a lot to the table. So great inclusion there. And filling out, just finding a use for the last 48 rep is Harry. So Harry brings, again, an absolute stonking gun that could be used as an expansive weapon or a 3 rate of fire, 3 stun damage weapon with medium range. So he brings a lot to the table in himself, even as just a henchman. Jumping over to Team Arrow's objective deck. This was built with a very specific purpose. So obviously it's a very elite crew in the sense that there's only 5 miniatures in the crew, all sort of 70 plus except for Harry point wise. They needed to build up a way of scoring, with their actions, even because they're only going to have 5 activations a turn. So lots to do with building up a bank of suspects and then using that bank of suspects over time. The likes of Secure the Perimeter, I Work Best Alone, and obviously Stick to the Plan, and the Imposition card from Bird. So just as a reminder, because this is a team, there is a mix of cards from different objectives decks here, because there are representatives in this crew from both the Birds of Prey faction and the Batman affiliated faction. You can see there as well, obviously, as we always suggest, if you can take a character card, take a character card. The Huntress one is about basically identifying one expensive miniature on the other side and removing them as casualty. And the Canary one is about, it's basically Die Hard plus, effectively keeping someone alive and then having them nearby someone who's not KO at the end of the turn. Again, recent favourite, I suppose, just to identify, They Won't See Me Coming, is all about actually not there for the 1 point that you might score if you actually score the card, but more about the free manipulate that it gives to a leader, sidekick, or free agent during your round. Over on the Organised Crime side now, so you hopefully all saw my last outing with Organised Crime, where I struggled to put points together, even though the list might have actually threatened quite a bit with Ventriloquist and Gunline and some nasty thugs with reinforced gloves. So I decided, even though it's sort of against my best wishes that I don't want the Organised Crime faction to just be a Black Mask faction, to try out the Black Mask part of things. So took the new Black Mask on the 60mm base with all the torture tools and all that nasty stuff, and one of the new female sidekicks. I could have taken the one with the RPG, but I really liked Fright in terms of what she might bring to the table, in terms of basically scaring people enough that they might curl up and die. So she was interesting, and obviously brings another gun to the table, but gets it for free, and also a free sort of mini Inspire, because she's that lieutenant role, which I hopefully will see more of. Maybe not just in Organised Crime, but in other crews in the future, because it's quite nice how you can maybe help buff crews that have less mobile bosses. So on top of that, we've got, I think, which is probably the one miniature that makes this faction tick with its deck, which is the Fixer. Fixer is the angry-looking lady with syringe, who does a lot. She's got the evidence tampering, which is so good, because every time you reveal a suspect, you get to place one of your own. Most importantly, she has the, I think it's the Master Torturer. Yeah, Master Torturer, which basically allows you to, shall we say, spare your opponents in their last moments. So if someone's killing or KOing someone nearby, you can basically say, well, you can take off a couple of damage points there, but I get to move one of my player markers around the board. That sounds like, why ever would I save my opponent? Well, you've got these pinched mobster cards in the deck that you need to move all the way back into your deployment zone, and that really helps with that. On top of that, I tried to fill out with some of the Black Mask thugs. I probably didn't take enough, because the mobster rule is so key to the Black Mask's thing, his special rule. But I did take, again, the other standout, which is the Black Mask Thug 7, with that assault rifle, or assault gun, shall we say. Added the silencer, because I don't like acrobats whatsoever. And then just try to fill everybody up on things that might help towards the objective deck, backpacks, those sorts of things, bribes to keep me in the running for the first player every round, and an extra bodyguard in the Tailor. So now we take a look at the deck I brought. It's mostly made up of the Organised Crime cards. I'm still feeling my way through this deck. People have said that it is a very... I don't like to use the word easy, but that's the word that gets used, that the requirements for scoring cards are easy. I would suggest that the requirements for scoring an individual card are easy, yes, but they're maybe not as synchronized as other crews might have them. So, some of the cards are asking you to kill someone, but then, as we explained, the Fixer is wanting you to stop killing someone so that you can move a pinched mobster back to your deployment zone. Some of them are asking, you to reveal an enemy suspect and then go and place an enemy suspect back in front of your boss. Again, if your opponent plays the keep away, obviously you want to keep your own suspects safe, then that's going to be a lot of ground that you have to cover with a vaguely slowish crew, and you've got stuff that relies upon your opponents in the program, removing your suspects, which again, unless they're motivated to do so through their own cards, isn't always going to be a sure thing. So it's a little bit schizophrenic in that side, but trying to find a way to put enough miniatures on the table to score that. So this is what I've brought, and included the Black Mask pair of objective cards. So just looking at the deployment here and the event type, coincidentally, the last time we showed you a video with Organised Crime, that we got the dual deployment type, and we got it again this time. Last time it was a big pain in the rear, and I was hoping to learn from it. So the dual is where basically there's an event marker on the verge of that sort of 12-inch quarter circle, and anything within 4 of that, basically you can only move in that area if you are a free agent. I didn't have a free agent on my side. Salandra had Captain Cold, so and she obviously lots of acrobats and lots of speed, so it was going to be easier for her to move around it. I was maybe looking to try and minimize the disruption that it caused this time around. The Gotham in Flames event, basically there's going to be a big I don't know what it is supposed to be. Like, there's basically a moving fire throughout the city. So, and it sort of illuminates and causes people to go on fire if they finish their activation in it. One thing to note at this point is that the Team Arrow, one of their rules is that they basically deploy everyone that they would deploy normally after their opponent, except for anything which is undercover or hidden. So I got to deploy my entire crew first before Salandra even had to put one miniature down on the board. So just board-wise, urban furniture. We have obviously the lampposts and the sewers. I rolled off first. I was trying to put sewers in a position where I could actually gain some speed and some sort of zipping around the board if possible. And I had a couple of guns, so I didn't mind putting some lights out where it might actually help. Salandra, in the opposite, usually puts everything on rooftops, but she'd actually brought herself a number of guns / bow and arrows / repeater crossbows, etc. this time around. So she decided that she wanted light on the board, but absolutely didn't want sewers. So those sewers became air ducts on tops of canisters and rooftops. So deployment-wise, as I said, Organised Crime had to plop their blob of Organised Crime goons down first. Wasn't much to this other than I was trying to sort of create two parts of this list to approach Salandra's list in different ways. I kind of wanted a forward base and sort of a backward base, so I was trying to keep Roman, the Black Mask, along with enough bunches of people to keep him alive. And also the sort of longer range guns towards the back, working their magic back there while slowly moving forward, and then a faster sort of forward party in Fright and the Fixer and a couple of guys who had extra movement to attack suspects and potentially do damage that way. Enough that I could keep running through my cards as the turn went on. So Team Arrow's deployment next. You can see obviously we've got 3 that were sort of clustered around Oliver Queen. Oliver being the always boss, he is within 8 inches of everyone. Then Black Canary and Captain Cold. So Captain Cold out in that event marker area, so he gets a wee bit of a forward deployment, meaning that he can drop a suspect, move, drop a suspect. Same with Black Canary. Just as a note, again, another one of the special rules for the Team Arrow team is that you get to give someone the multitask ability, which basically gives you a choice of a couple of different buffs for the game. Salandra chose Captain Cold to have the Fighter trait, which gives him +1 to attack and defense, and the Claws trait, which means his unarmed attacks would do blood stun damage. So that pushed him up to defense 5, which is really tanky, and meant that probably was going to be very difficult for any of my guys to hit. So here we're at the end of the first Raise the Plan phase. During the Take the Lead roll, even though Salandra had the +1 from Captain Cold, I won the roll off and chose to go second to hope that I would give myself a chance to break any ties into the second round. During phase 1, Salandra played the Cover Your Ears Black Canary character card. So normally, and it has become a meme between us, that Salandra always pretty much 100% mulligans her hand in order to get Die Hard into her hand. And she had a little giggle to herself when she didn't get Die Hard into her hand this turn, but she got a 3-point version, which is similarly as easy to score on turn 1 in the Cover Your Ears card. Moving into phase 2, you can see Salandra placed the Audacity out on Ollie, Harrison Wells, Captain Cold, and Black Canary. My side, phase 2, I was able to play the Recovering the Juice card on the Fixer. This again was sort of to get it out of my hand. Basically, effectively, it has to go on a character that might reveal a suspect, and then they survive to the end of the round. I didn't foresee Salandra giving me anything easy to get, but it meant that it wasn't in my hand to waste card space. The action kicked off with Huntress, who actually took what we would call probably a quite passive first action, even though she's got that nasty weapon. She didn't come down the pipe, probably for smart reasons. She just jumped out as far as she needed to be to place a suspect on the board edge, looking probably to set up one of those, also to stick the plans and the secure the perimeters. But Salandra also got an opportunity to put a card out from hand, which was the In Position Birds of Prey card. So again, that'll help her score based on the number of suspects that are on the board. So again, building that early bank of passive scoring. My first activation was the LexCorp Trooper. Mainly took him because of his follow me trait, being able to sort of buff up the speed of the list. Had to basically give him audacity for that, unfortunately. Used that immediately on the tailor being the bodyguard. I intended to split the crew, as I said, into two, and I wanted a bit of protection for Fright when they went off on their own. He then used the rest of his, probably only about 60% of his actions, because he's double inspired in that little sort of loop of Fright and Black Mask, but bounded out as far as he could, which is not very far, only 8 inches, and placed a suspect next to the mining carts there. As we mentioned in the deployment step, Canary was going to have that ability to be inspired, using Audacity to basically drop 2 suspects. She was undercover, so she was forward deployed, so you got them down on the board edge. Again, as I keep saying, building up that sort of credit for the future to keep scoring going. Also, keeping scoring going, she was able to play the I Work Best Alone card, which means there's numeric counters, as you can see, the 5 and 6 dice on those 2 suspects. At the end of the turn, Salander will roll a dice, and if the dice matches either of those, or any future ones that Canary plays, then you remove that number and you score that card. Again, this is all very passive, all very keep away from my mob of folks, which is good to keep a team that's that small healthy. Just to add on the last suspect that the Black Canary placed, I designated as a rat suspect. So playing the killing the rat card from hand. Effectively how that works is like it's a mini sort of domination marker from the Soldiers of Fortune crew. Effectively, if I have more guys around it than my opponent, then I get to score it. I'd never expected to be able to score it this turn again. It was just cycling through things from my hand to keep things going. I have a couple of ways of moving suspects around if I need to, but I really didn't think I had the range to get all the way to the board edge, or at least within 6 inches of it to make it count. But it got out of hand. So next up was the Tailor. With his extra bumped up movement, he was able to sort of get out as far as possible and then just use again one of his extra manipulate actions to pop down a suspect. Lander took one of her many passes at this stage. She was fairly certain that regardless of how many of these she used, she was going to be in a positive position to at least get the roll off this round. So I decided, and as was planned really, to take the Fixer on the little sort of forward team with the Tailor. So ran her as far down the board. She's a decent movement, and I had her as far forward as possible. Plunked her beside the suspect that the Tailor had popped out. Revealed that to play the valuable commodities card from hand. Kind of thought that with the Protect Me trait on the Fixer, that it was unlikely that she was going to take a lot of direct hits. So I decided that it would be safe on her to have the loot. And then I used her other free manipulate from either Black Mask or Fright to place down my own suspect just to keep up my numbers. So Salander then used another of her passes. One of the rules of Team Arrow is that you can actually only use 2 passes consecutively, so this would be her last in a row. She would have to activate someone next, and then she can continue using passes as she wishes. I decided to take the Thug 7, the one with the nasty rifle with, or carbine or whatever sort of thing is, with the assault trait and the silencer to manage, shall we say, bouncy acrobats. And try and get him further up the board. Didn't really get far enough. Couldn't really find a spot where he could place down a suspect. So I was trying to sort of lay down a field of fire because there was enough lights on the board that he could probably affect things. But probably I would have liked him a bit further up. Again, the problem with being squished into a corner here. As mentioned, obviously Salandra at this point had to actually activate a miniature. She'd taken 2 passes, the last 2 activations. Harrison Wells, with his nasty beam rifle, just basically popped forward. Had an audacity anyway, so he could place a suspect, but he was also inspired, so it didn't really matter. Behind the bus stop, getting out another suspect, at least 4 inches away from the other 2, leaving enough room for Captain Cole to place one later. And again, that nasty gun threatening enough range here. Over to me again, and this time I took the Black Mask Thug 5, which is the gentleman with what looks like a mobile phone in his hand. And his trick is that he has this sort of a mini hacking, so he has this trait called computer intrusion, special trait. So he moved up and was basically able to push away some of the suspects that had already been placed out in order to be able to place a new one, just making a bit of space. I think he's pretty key to the crew. His weapon isn't the worst. I mean, it's only a single stun, but it's devastating and heavy, so it might do a bit of stun damage, but it's that special trait that makes him, I would almost say, an auto-include at this point, because this crew needs to be able to move markers and suspects around to set up the right types of things. So Salandra passed on activation again. At this point, she did inform me after the game that she had 4 phase 4 cards in her hand, 2 copies of Secure the Perimeter and Stick to the Plan, and she didn't have any real way of getting through them without wasting suspects or resource points. So she was sort of just, I think, fairly comfortable that I wasn't going to come and do anything nasty and stop her from scoring, but at the same time pretty frustrated that she couldn't achieve anything else. No snitches, that kind of thing. On my side, I took Black Mask Thug 1, the guy that looks like Vega from Street Fighter. It's called Vigo, unironically. He is, again, one of those guys that I don't know if I would call him auto-include, but he has a bit of speed because he has the Swift trait, so he's movement 10, and he can make an effort to get an extra 2 inches, so he's got potential 12 inches. That's why I sort of deployed him a bit deeper. So he did that, ran all the way up the board as far as possible, placed out a 4th suspect just to keep my suspects a little bit in par with Salandra's as she continued to bounce around the board. Salandra again took that consecutive pass, and I then chose to move Malatesta just up the board. At this point, same position as Salandra. I've always looked at the Organised Crime cards. There isn't early scoring in those cards unless your opponent comes to engage or comes aggressively at you to do things. There isn't even anything I can sort of use as a resource in my hand at the minute. I've got 2 copies of Ping Tribute, which is all about healing damage. Spring Cleaning, again, removing enemy suspects. And the program which I had stashed for a future use. So it was just as uninspiring as that. Couldn't even place the suspect down because I didn't have the space. But that's where we leave it with Malatesta. So Captain Cold on the Team Arrow side, Mr. Snart, decided, as we talked about, to place an event marker or a suspect in the 4-inch radius of the event marker. So that's really only going to be there until a free agent goes to sort it out or some other rule pulls it outside of there. Then hop the other side of the bus beside the big old lamppost, bold as you like, with his defense 5 and a bit of cover, to place the 2nd suspect out and top out as many as possible for the crew. Setting himself up with potential for that gun, either the template version or the medium range beam version. He's very good at shooting things either way. So at this point, I was hoping that I could find a way to get something out of Black Mask. Obviously, only Fright left up there in the corner. Took Black Mask. He's only got 8-inch moves. That's why I had to deploy him as far forward as possible in amongst the scrum. Probably should have made some more room for him because he's right along the wall, so he's going to take a longer time to get up the board. But I was looking to try and trigger the mob rule to have a ranged attack from one of my buddies, potentially someone who was available. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, I had left the guy with the silencer just the wrong side of that truck, so he didn't have line of sight to anything. So instead I just decided, probably foolishly, but just to push someone a little bit further forward, so the computer intrusion guy with the mobile phone, because he has the mobster rule, I was able to shove him 4 inches forward. Now, if he'd got into base-to-base contact with an enemy, he would have been able to make a free hand-to-hand combat attack, but did not. So that was all Rowan was able to do on his activation. Last to go on Team Arrow was the boss, Oliver Queen. So he is not the fastest gent, and he only has 1 arm, but somehow he can still managed to use a bow and a grapple gun and all sorts of other things. He also was listed as having reinforced gloves per the equipment list. I think that's a bit inappropriate for a man with one hand. But he did activate his grappling gun, bat claw, whatever you like to call it, hook arrow, and zoomed 15 inches across the board to where you can see him in a spot where he could pop down another suspect within 2 inches of the board edge, outside of 4 inches of all the others, but also like spreading that inspire as far as he possibly could for next round. Potentially sort of threatening again with his ranged into the sort of area where the Black Mask guys would want to get to next turn. It was at exactly this point that I remember that Salander had quite a few template weapons, and I just left a big old clump of everybody, I guess, to be hit by as many things as possible. But at this point, I didn't have a lot of options of maneuvering around, not both the event marker, but also the scenery. And I needed to make headway, so this was the, crow flies opportunity to get upfield. Fright, who, as I said, has tons of use, didn't have any use this turn whatsoever, so all she was able to do was move into the crush. Again, to spread that double sort of vague inspire thing from her and Black Mask for next turn. More manipulates than you could ever take home or use. And then potentially get into the action doing something with her sort of forward advanced crew that I was trying to form for next turn. Will note that I did spend one of my friendly suspect markers to use the program resource card, which allowed me to force Huntress back into her own deployment zone, which is not only bad for her because she's further away from the action, but it also meant that she was far enough away from her friends that the Canary objective card that she had played earlier would not actually score this round. Salander wasn't best pleased. Scoring very poor for both of us. I think if either of us was a Suicide Squad team, we'd be losing members of our crew right now. But Salander just had two, which were two of those Phase 4 cards that we mentioned. The Secure the Perimeter and the Stick to the Plan, giving her a total of 4 points. Did have two things set up for future. She didn't roll the right dice roll for the Ag Work Best alone. And she has that in position set up for future. Me, I have nothing. I have the valuable commodities in hand on the Fixer. So that's hopefully, at some point I'll keep hold of that, but there was nothing else that I could actually get out this turn, all being very reliant on interaction with a crew that is trying to stay as far away from me as possible. Go straight into the second round. Salander won the roll-off as expected. I then, she put out her Audacity on Captain Cold, Harrison Wells, Ollie, and Black Canary, leaving Huntress without one for the minute, but the Team Arrow crew do have a rule where you can move an Audacity marker from an unactivated miniature by spending one of your passes. On my side, it was the same four as last. Actually, not the same four, sorry. The Black Mask Thug 5, Fright, Black Mask himself, and the guy with the assault rifle looking to try and shoot something this round. Then the event marker, the Gotham in Flames marker, moved. I chose to move it towards the middle of the board, probably not expecting it to go as far as it did, as it went 9 inches. I was thinking of trying to block Salander's approach. Probably not the best because it ended up blocking my sort of come up the board, trying to be aggressive with my mob. So on Salander's side, and this was the reason I wanted to win the roll-off, because they wanted to stop this from happening, Captain Cold was to go first, and he had that expert marksmanship, or whatever it is that he has, that gives him all the benefits to shooting. Ranged Master, sorry. He decided, and Salander decided, I guess, that Black Mask Thug 5 was the guy that was going to be a pain in the backside, the guy with the mobile phone. I think not a bad choice of target selection. There's a lot of protect me and bodyguards in there, so that was probably the one guy that he could shoot that would actually do sort of harm to my list, because I needed the ability to move suspects around to sort of get at things easier. I think Salander originally thought that he was able to move the event markers, but that's a difference between hacking and computer intrusion. Just suspects for Black Mask Thug 5. So he got shot with the cold gun. and got summarily killed, except lo and behold, it was actually non-lethal ammo. So Salander played the non-lethal ammo card to turn all the blood damage into stun, which KO'd the poor man. He's face down. That allowed me to play the pinched mobster card, which is when a friendly model takes damage from an attack, I get to place an event marker in contact with it. That can be manipulated to move it 4 inches at a time, and once it gets back to my deployment, I score it. So that's one of those pinched mobsters out, and I have a little bit of a bucket line ready to push it all the way back, so we'll see how that goes. Cold then just decided it was time to back off a little bit. He did first, before he left, order Ollie Queen to place a suspect down with his special. As you can see, back where the one had been taken off for the secured the perimeter last turn, and then jump behind the building in the middle to keep himself in cover, but sort of covering the middle with his fire. So I took this opportunity to get myself off the mark. I had placed the pinched mobster event marker specifically in contact with the thug that had been hit to make sure it touched another thug. Black Mask Thug 1, Vega, or Vigo, or whatever you want to call him. He has the double extra manipulates from Black Mask and Fright being nearby, so he was able to manipulate it before he moves. It pops back to about 4 inches away, and then he popped over with his movement and manipulated it again to push it all the way into my deployment zone. This is what I mean about a bucket line. It is like a gradual sort of drag things back. Sometimes I know there's other ways to move those around, but it feels sometimes like you have to have this sort of path to the end zone, or whatever you want to call it. But it got me off the mark, 3 points, and that's the start of it for my crew. At this point, all the sort of imminent threats were out of the way, so I decided to sort of continue shimmying forward. I wanted to have Black Mask somewhere where I could potentially score the Paying Tribute card once I actually get that rolling. So I need to be able to place suspects nearby him. So I did move him, used the mob rule to push Malatesta forward. Malatesta had a specific equipment which made him in a mobster for this game. Malatesta is fast, he's got a backpack. I was just trying to get him out and possibly grab that one suspect that was a little bit further forward. Probably quite bait-ish for for him to run out that far. Bit daft, but I needed to get something going to continue scoring. At this point, I will admit, I absolutely overlooked Black Mask's gun until probably the third turn. I had totally had a brain fart and imagined it was just like one of the normal automatic guns. And I don't think I had a shot this turn, but I definitely could have positioned or prioritized it a bit better for future rounds. So I took my one bodyguard of the list in the Tailor as far forward as he could go. Again, there is that circle of the Gotham in flames that I didn't want to put people on fire, because it's one of those. It's probably a bit worse than poison in terms of the damage it does, and it kind of multiplies itself up throughout the game. Easier to get rid of than poison though, but I didn't really want to have to start wasting movement to do so. So he sort of bopped up onto the edge of that and placed a suspect down, and again, keeping his radius of what he can see of people damage-wise around people. So Salandra decided this was the point of time she wanted to be a bit more aggressive. Ran round the corner with Black Canary and popped a suspect down. That suspect was within 4 inches of Black Mask, and therefore was able to trigger the copy of In Position that Salandra already had in play, which is a friendly model places a suspect within 4 inches of an enemy model, and there are at least 4 friendly suspects in play. So that was 2 points. Then Salandra also had one in hand. So whilst those were the exact same cards, they were not being played in the same activation, therefore they can both be scored during this activation, because one was set up previously and the other was set up, was put from hand this turn. Fairly strong, and I don't see why you wouldn't just immediately try and set up more than one to score off the same opportunity like that. Very good like that. So once she decided that that wasn't enough for the turn, she decided to screech at all of my crew using the expansive template, which is throwing, so it doesn't lose any rate of fire, and beam. So it ended up affecting quite a few of my crew. I think it was at least 4. The KO'd Thug 5, Fright, the Fixer, and Black Mask himself. Hitting, I think Fright was able to avoid being hit, but Fixer, Black Mask, and the Thug on the floor all took a knock, and it has a push effect, so it kind of pushed them all away from that corner. The big thing out of this was that it actually rolled a crit on the Fixer, and the crit is that model is stunned, so the Fixer could not do anything other than a movement action this turn. Salandra doubled down on that by then using the Persuasive trait from Canary onto the Fixer, meaning that the Fixer had to be the next model to activate. So basically, next up, and we'll do it right now, and the Fixer had to activate. So as I said, Fixer is next to activate because she had to. I will note that from the hit that was put on the last turn from Canary, I was able to play another pinched mobster out on the board, so that's my second in play. Again, it was beside the Thug that was on the floor. Fixer was just trying to keep tight with the Tailor so that if she had to use the Protect Me or Bodyguard trait, he was nearby, but also start to get putting into use the backpack and the evidence tampering and all those free manipulates that the crew is giving out. And potentially, Black Canary might die at some stage, so there might be something that I want to use that for. Next up was Huntress, and just as a note, Salandra spent a pass marker on the Fixer's activation to, as I said, use that Team Arrow special rule to reallocate an unused, unactivated Audacity counter to Huntress from Harry Wells. So she used that because she didn't have an Inspire, because Ollie was way further up the board, to just pop out another suspect, basically exactly where there was one last turn that had been taken off for Secure the Perimeter, and she sort of hung back once again, ready to go next turn. So at this point I thought this was the best time to bring the Silencer to bear on the Black Canary Acrobat hiding around the corner. Especially since I only had 2 ammo, I thought use it while I have it. So took the Black Mask Thug 7, aimed directly at Black Canary, who had wandered into 12 inches away from me. And even though she has Acrobat, because of the Silencer, she cannot dodge the attacks. The rifle is rate of fire 3, and it has a red dot, so it had a good chance of getting some hits through on the defense for Canary. Unfortunately, I was only able to get 2 hits through, which did 4 blood damage. Wasn't the end of his activation though. He did have an Audacity and a ton of extra manipulates. Charged forward, revealed the suspect that Canary had put out, and then basically committed to scoring, potentially in the future, the Paying Tribute card. So all that mobster would have to do is place a suspect within 4 of a friendly boss. I would have been able to do it this turn had I not had the forward suspect sitting right behind Black Mask Thug 7, as you can see, as that would have been good. Salandra then also committed to another in-position card that she might score later in the round. LexCorp Trooper 2 was the next one up. He basically came forward to move the event marker back. Again, bucket line, pushing it as far forward or by far back as possible, right in contact with Vega, who'll be able to sort of shuffle that back even further next time out. So Harry Wells was up next. He had an Inspire from Ollie Queen. His Audacity that he'd been given had been past Huntress earlier in the round. So all he did was move and place a suspect. That suspect was within 4 inches of the Tailor, around the other side of that wall. So that allowed Salandra to score the imposition that she had played out of hand last activation during my turn. So that scored her 2 points. And because this is a new activation, she was able to play an objective from hand this time round, which was the second copy of I Work Best Alone. First one being Black Canary, and the second one being on Harry Wells. So we had to think about this, and Salandra did play it out with a numerical counter of a 4 on it. We read it through, and we came to the conclusion that if she was to roll a 4, 5, or 6 for either card, it would score. So that's why we suggested to spread the numbers, even though they'd been played for different cards. As a note, she did then play the Overdrive card to put out a Venom counter on the board, just to cycle through her hand and get some sort of resources out there for some fighting. So I activated Fright next, and I have down in my notes that Fright wastes turn. I was a little frustrated with how this turn turned out. I had eyeballed it for probably 15 minutes because we had lunch right in the middle of it. I was expecting Fright to be able to land right behind Black Canary beside this motorcycle. It turned out that the motorcycle had some sort of way that it clipped that I couldn't actually fit her on the board. And as we've always tried to be fair with these sort of things, if you can't fit it on, it doesn't fit, even though if that was a physical, real game, definitely would have fitted in there. So I was too far away to shoot Black Canary, and even if I was, she would have been able to just acrobat out of the way of it, because only the silencer stops that. So I decided to try and use as many of my tricks as possible. Moving up, using her Discourage trait to reduce the willpower on Black Canary, which I successfully did. Then through Scientific, after I performed a special action, I was able to perform another special action, and I used Inspire Fear. Hoping that the reduced willpower of Black Canary might actually help to remove her as a casualty through the Inspire Fear. I will say, 100% mistake, I believe Black Canary failed by an exact total of 5, which means that she was one off being removed as casualty, but I hadn't actually figured in the bonus -1 willpower from the fixer nearby, so that's on me. Black Canary should have been off the board literally then, and I definitely wouldn't have had Waste's turn written down on my summary, but I felt that Fright was just ever so close, and my own mistake caused her not to remove a pretty strong miniature. So Ollie was last activate for Team Arrow, and he basically decided that he wanted to get in on the fight with his one-armedness. He picked up and then popped the Venom Dose that was sitting beside the suspect that we placed out before. Salandra used the Won't See Me Coming as a resource to give him an extra manipulate. Find the sweetest of sweet spots, basically where the fire wasn't going to get him, but he was going to be able to be in contact with the tailor and reach it through his 9-inch acrobat full move, and effectively knock the tailor out without any sort of issue whatsoever. Then also lifted the suspect that the tailor had placed earlier to try and strengthen her suspect advantage in the game to hopefully score more stick to the plans in the future. And this was the one turn that I didn't have the program in my hand to mark one of Saland's miniature who removes a suspect for death. So very frustrating for me, because I definitely could have done with more sort of passive scoring to set up reasons to do things in the future. Just as a note, saying about the program card, I did play the Pinch Mobster card when Ollie punched the tailor to get that out of hand, but he'd already revealed the suspect first in that activation, and when I played the Pinch Mobster card, I then drew the program. So the exact wrong order of things for my perspective. Last up in the round for me was Malatesta, and the nippy little Italian man with the broken bottle that he's looking to knock over someone's head like he's in a nightclub, and he's been annoyed by someone that brushed him on the way to the toilets. Decided that he was going to basically make a suicide run for the middle of the board. At this point, I will admit the frustrations of not being able to score more than one card so far, and really not have anything really feasibly set up to do a lot of scoring as compared to all the passive scoring that was happening on the good guy side. I probably just saw something to go after and ran after it. I totally blanked the Captain Cold was around the corner, and I just thought, you know what, let's go grab this suspect, try and maybe whittle down the opportunity to score the stick to the plans that Salandra had. So I did. I ran into the middle of the board, took the suspect off the board with my backpack, placed my suspect with my Inspire, and then I used the program card that I'd just drawn at the wrong time in order to sort of drag Ollie Queen into a bit of trouble, hopefully, beside Fright and the Fixer for the next turn, hoping to get the jump on those miniatures before Salandra gets to activate. So just before we recorded this exact bit of audio, Salandra asked me if we wanted to do both the crews at the one time. Yes, Because on the organised crime side, I scored 1 card, Pinch Mobster. On Salandra's side, we have 3 copies of Imposition, all scored in 1 turn. 2 scored off the same opportunity because of the way it worked out. 1 in play and then 1 from hand. Non-lethal ammo on Captain Cole's nicely aimed cold gun into the head of the computer intrusion thug. Secure the perimeter from hand at the end of the round. I work best alone, finally one of those. Salandra rolled a 4 and scored that one. And then Snitch. Snitch was the one that Huntress played out, so getting those big 3-pointers in and now leading 19 points to a measly 3. And I suppose, just to note, obviously the main mechanic that helps out the organised crime is that they get black money from scoring their objective cards. So I have a grand total of $100 of black money. Into round 3, and quite a lot to talk about here. I'd hoped to eventually win a take the lead role, but didn't. Salandra going first for the 3rd turn in a row. Quite busy. She was able to play out 3 Phase 1 cards. Finally, getting Die Hard in hand, playing that on Huntress, right at the back there, probably not able for me to threaten. Cover Your Ears, that I had cancelled out earlier, she got it back into hand and played it this time on Ollie. Ollie was in the thick of it, but Salandra was going first, so she knows that she could keep him safe if needs be. Then the Vendetta Huntress card, played that and targeted Huntress to take out Fright but before the end of the game, because you have to target a miniature that's 50 rep or more. Nothing for me in Phase 1. Audacity-wise, Salandra for now has placed out on Canary, Harry Wells, Ollie Queen, and Captain Cold. For me, I have it out on Fright, the Fixer, Black Mask, and the Black Mask Thug 7 with the Silencer. So, first up for Salandra was Ollie Queen. Just a slight correction, I guess, to Phase 2. I did actually play out an objective card, which was the Recovering the Juice card. Played it on the Fixer, hoping to pick up some suspects this turn, eventually getting close. So, as mentioned, Ollie was right in the scrum, but Salandra had a way to get him out, so he activated first. Before he decided to go away, he decided to use his tactical action for some punching. After some mulling it over, Salandra decided to punch the Fixer, which actually in hindsight probably was not the... She probably should have gone after Fright, because Fright didn't have a way to get rid of the damage. The Fixer didn't care how many hits she was going to take, because she has Protect Me, so she efforted once and all that damage went onto the Tailor, who was KO'd on the ground, but that's an actual possible thing you can do. Because he was KO'd on the ground, the stun damage added an extra blood, and the Tailor basically was removed as casualty. Ollie, as I said, popped his back claw and zoomed away as far as possible to hopefully set up the scoring of that Cover Your Ears card that Salandra had played. So Thug 7 had his moment of glory and decided to unload his second lot of bullets into Black Canary, who had been left out to dry a little bit by Ollie running away, but I think Salandra had planned for this anyway, because she knew she couldn't save both of them. So he fired and did more than enough damage this time to take Canary out. Now, with the Fixer nearby, I had a decision to make whether I wanted to allow Canary to live. I had it set up on my hand that I was going to be probably more incentivized to actually kill her off. Just to remind you, the Fixer's ability allows you to basically say, hey, you can take away 3 of those damage markers as long as I can move one of my event markers or player markers 6 inches. So I can't move the likes of sewers or lampposts, but I can move the event markers to help me score the Pinch Mobster. But I thought I had the bucket line fairly okay setup wise in such a way that I was going to be able to score things. So I thought, you know what, let's get rid of a threat from the board who's possibly going to put down that screamy weapon again and cause all sorts of problems. So with killing Black Canary, I was able to play Spring Cleaning from hand, which then forced Salandra to place 2 suspects within 4 inches of Black Canary before she was removed. This was a perfect time to play this because obviously Salandra had taken off suspects at the end of last turn. Normally you cannot play Spring Cleaning if they don't have 2 suspects to actually place onto the board. So those got placed as far away as possible, so Salandra trying to, stop me scoring it. But once those are removed off the board, I get to score spring cleaning. Then the little guy ran backwards, and with his Inspire, or with the extra Manipulate given by Fright, he placed his suspect at the board edge, which was within 4 inches of his boss, the Black Mask, to score the paying tribute that I had put in to play the previous turn. So, sort of a little bit of an example of how organized crime start to snowball whenever they have things set up in the past, as things go. Just as a note, before Black Canary was taken off, during my activation, Salandra spent one of her passes to move the Audacity from Black Canary to Huntress. Captain Cole was up next, and all he did was basically level his gun at Malatesta, who had extremely overextended himself to the middle of the board, much to my chagrin. Removed him very easily. There was no keeping him up and alive, so that was an easy kill. So, trying to get something out of the miniatures left on the board, I chose to activate Fright next, and again I obviously loaded her up with Audacity, and there's a nice juicy Harrison Wells who was threatening with that horrible gun of his, a huge ton of my crew. So I thought, let's give it a couple of goes to try and get rid of him. So bounded over. Thankfully, so I couldn't make the mistake this time. Actually outside of the range of the fixer, so I only had to worry about the actual -2 from Fright's trait. She used the special action, as I say, the Discourage. And Harry failed that, so he was -2 willpower. So then I used Scientific to use Inspire Fear. So the 4 willpower Harry only had to fail this by 6 or more to be removed. He summarily rolled a 9 and failed it by 5, which meant that he suffered the Scared, Terror 1 and Slow 2. Means that he would have 1 less action, but I mean, in reality, he would probably just spend his free Manipulate for that. So having failed killing him that way, I used the Pain and Money resource card to place a blood marker on an active friendly model, i.e. Fright, and it gains 2 attack markers, so I give her 2 extra attack markers, and then basically clenched her fists to punch Harrison Wells. Harry efforted once, and Fright efforted twice, I believe, to keep up a solid amount of potential attacks. And I absolutely fluffed it. Harry defended himself and was left on 1 stun damage left. And very frustrated me as I continue to not be able to put someone down with one of my more deadly characters in the crew. Huntress was next to activate, having taken that Audacity from the now removed Black Canary early in the round. She used her free Manipulate from being near the always boss Ollie Queen to lift and reveal the suspect beside her, committing to scoring the valuable commodities. So she basically has a loot marker on her card now, and hopefully not going to drop that and score those 3 points by the end of the turn. Jumps up onto the broken down van, which is within 4 inches of Ollie Queen, so hopefully again continue to help score that Cover Your Ears card, and decided to take the opportunity to shoot at the overextended Fright. To hopefully score that Vendetta card that Salandra didn't actually know that she was going to get an opportunity to do so. So, with the horrible repeater crossbow or whatever it is that she has, which has Assault, she was going to need 5s to hit, but I guess a little complexity here that Huntress has an ability to reroll misses, and Fright has an ability that forces people to reroll successful ranged attacks. So how it worked was that any successful hits on the first roll, Fright could force Huntress to reroll those, but then any of the misses from the first roll, Huntress could reroll those. So it would be the result of those 2 separate reroll mechanics that would be the amount of hits. And after all, basically Fright took 4 blood damage and a knockdown because Salandra rerolled a 6 on the strength dice into a 6 on the strength dice, giving her a knockdown. Not enough blood damage to remove Fright from the table, but that's where that ended up. So, being fairly aware of the precarious position that Fright was in, I decided that this point was the time that I would actually realise that Black Mask has a very, very handy gun. What I didn't even, I looked at it and I was like, oh my goodness, that's medium range. My goodness, that does blood damage. So I was like, okay, well that gives me an option. What I didn't actually realise was that it also had accurate. So For some reason, I played out the message job resource to reduce Harry's defense by 1 during this attack action, and shot. So that reduced his defense to 2, but in reality, I would have had the same effect using the accurate rule with the +1 to hit. So I shot, and I had 3 rate of fire because there was cover, and all I needed was basically not to roll a 1 on any of the dice. And of course, a big old fat 1 turns up, and Harry continues to be the hardest thing to kill on the board. Never mind the defense 4 acrobat that got wiped out previously, or anyone else. This guy here in just a leather jacket is the hardest thing to kill on the board. I then tried to move Black Mask forward to a point where he was still in protect me range of some things, but threatening down board to do something at some point in the future. But that was the frustration. I couldn't get any more cards scored out of that. So after Huntress had tried to put down Fright, Harry thought, you know what, there's a woman who's flat on the floor here, let's take my opportunity to try and punch her in the face. Even with his little unarmed melee attack, because he was scared from Fright's special Inspire Fear earlier in the turn, he was still at -1 to hit. So -1 and +1 for the person being knocked down. He couldn't effort because he was at 5 stun out of 6. So he basically rolled a 3, 2, and 1 and missed all of his attacks. He then took that as a reason to run like hell, hide behind the other side of the van, and basically pop a suspect down. As you remember, he was given the Terror 1 effect, so he couldn't use his special action this turn because that was basically given up for that Terror if he had one that he wanted to use. So just to note, the suspect that Harry Wells did place was a snitch, so that's sitting there waiting to be annoying for the end of the round. Next up for me was Fixer. Fixer, at this point, decided to actually do something. And I don't mean that in a negative way to her character. I mean that I obviously had struggled to score points, but I had this set up with the spring cleaning suspects that had been hanging around since Black Canary had been removed. So Fixer has a backpack, evidence tampering, and I think 2 extra manipulates from Fright and Black Mask and her own Audacity. So she was absolutely tanked on actions. Said to move around the corner, reveal the first of the spring cleanings suspects. So that point of time, I was able to play one of my own suspects with the tampering, evidence tampering trait. I was also able to play the spring cleaning resource from hand for a point. When revealing an enemy suspect, choose another enemy suspect or friendly marker and move it 4 inches. So I could have moved one of my event markers, but I decided to move the other spring cleaning suspect to get points on the board because I was fairly certain that the pinched mobsters were going to get scored at some point. So I moved the other spring cleaning suspect towards me, used one of my other free manipulates or reveals, whatever, to pick it up as well. With that, I was able to score the spring cleaning that was out. So that's my 3rd card scored. That was now $300 of black market money. From hand, I then played the paying tribute objective because Fixer had revealed an enemy suspect. So that card would then score in the future if she places a suspect within 4 inches of a friendly boss. We also have to remember that she's carrying the loot and has also committed to the recovering the juice card, which means target a friendly model. That model reveals an enemy suspect and is still in the game area. So that is primed to score as well. So quite a lot riding on Fixer, but I suppose that was the first sort of step towards ramping things up for the organized crime crew. X-Core Trooper was next to activate. I just basically popped him the other side of the car and used his free manipulate from the Black Mask Inspire to push the pinched mobster towards Black Mask 7. So again, a little bit of pinball, pinging it from one side to another, hoping to make it home at some stage. Salandra placed out a Titan dose, or Venom dose, sorry, right beside Ollie Queen with a Overdrive card. So Thug 1, which is Vigo, was right in prime position again to score one of the pinched mobsters. So he was Able to do that, I then give him the I'll double it black market equipment, which was spent out of my now $400 fund, so I left myself with $200. Meant that if he starts the turn without an Audacity, it may perform an additional action. I had looked at a lot of different ways to try and sort of move as far forward down the board to potentially remove a suspect to get things moving. But as Vigo, I guess, appeared down near Fright after running down the board, Salander decided to play the Secure the Perimeter card as a resource, removing that suspect and basically using it as a ranged attack on Vigo, doing, I believe, 2 blood and 2 stun to the poor thug. So, the end of round 3, Salander scored 2 of those Phase 1 cards, the Die Hard Plus, as we'll call them, and that snitch that Harry placed right on the boundary. For me, I scored the Spring Cleaning, as you saw the Fixer tidy up. We saw the Paying Tribute that the thug completed whenever he hopped back after revealing a suspect the turn before and played a suspect near Black Mask. Pitch Mobster was from Vigo pushing the event marker back in, and then Recovering the Juice was from that amount of reveals by the Fixer around the corner. So going into round 4, that left the scores at a phenomenal 27-13. So remembering that 13 was exactly what I scored last time with Organised Crime, this was still a long way behind. And I think my hopes of winning it were out of sight by this point, because just the amount of things that the Batman deck can give you, even though it's not Batman, it's Team Arrow. But anyway, into round 4, and I had hoped again that gods would shine on me and give me the first activation, which they didn't. I rolled a big fat 1 when all I needed to roll was a big fat 2. And Salander was able to, didn't have any cards to play in Phase 1, but she basically put out Audacity on everybody was left. I had another copy of Recovering the Juice to play out, which went out on the Fixer again. Fixer was a recipient of Audacity, as was Fright, Black Mask, and LexCorp Trooper 2. So, Huntress was the first activation of the round, and Salander looking to absolutely guarantee that vendetta by looking at the downed figure of Fright. Aimed the repeater crossbow once again and hit, doing tons of blood, but thankfully I was able to push it off to Vigo by playing the Killing the Rat card, which allows it to push the damage to another friendly model within 4. Unfortunately for Vigo, that was the end of his life in this game. All he did was sort of push some pinched mobsters into the deployment zone, ferrying some of his friends home. But he was removed summarily, pretty much guaranteeing that vendetta wouldn't score at all. Salandra then basically thought, ooh, Fright can now possibly scare me to death by just looking at me, so I better get the person who's carrying the valuable commodities as far back as possible. So Huntress backed off pretty much to where she had actually sat most of the game, 2 inches away from her deployment zone, scoring tons of points by just being there, and played down a suspect with the I Work Best Alone card. Now, we played it this way, that the I Work Best Alone card that was played on Black Canary was discarded when Black Canary was removed. We're not entirely certain if that's the way it should be, looking at the new wording that Knight has on it. So, you know, by all means, we'll open to figuring that out for next time. But that's how we played it during this game. So Fright was my first activation then, effectively trying to get her use out of her before she was removed from the table, as someone had already tried very hard to do so. Decided that I needed to also reduce Salandra's ability to score this turn, so ran around the corner with Fright. Even though she'd moved before shooting and she was in base-to-base contact, her 3 rate of fire plus strength dice light automatic gun allows her to shoot while in base-to-base contact. So basically aimed it directly at his head and was able to get 2 hits after all that and took him out with the 2 blood damage that it did. That allowed me to score the Message Job card from hand, and an enemy model is removed as casualty. At this point, I then decided to try and over-egg it and try and get more out of this activation than I could. I basically tried to use these special actions on Oliver Queen to remove him from the board. So I was able to reduce his willpower by 2 but then he didn't feel his Inspire Fear by enough in order to actually be removed as a casualty. He did have the Scared effect, so he would have -1 on any attack rolls should they turn up. After being glared at by Fright, Ollie thought it's time to actually take my activation. So he decided that he was going to, first of all, play the Won't See Me Coming to give himself an extra Manipulate. Then he aimed his Kryptonian arrow at Fright, hit and did 4 stun, so hit with one of the arrows, not the strength dice. Sorry. Not 4 stun because Salander was able to score non-lethal ammo from hand, changing the blood to stun. He then basically retreated to the board edge and placed out a suspect to again strengthen that position for scoring either or both, secure the perimeter and stick to the plan. So Thug 7 at this point activates and just moves the event marker closer to the deployment zone, trying to score that last pinched mobster on the table. So just closing out the passive points, Salander basically retreated Captain Cold away from the Gotham Fire marker and placed a snitch. Pretty much measured out, there was nothing that I was going to be able to do to move it closer to me, regardless of what I did. So that was another 3 points that was going to tick up at the end of the round. Just to quickly note that on Captain Cold's turn, I cycled through a couple of cards by turning that snitch into also a rat marker as well as a snitch marker, and then I also played the Overdrive Venom Dose just beside Black Mask in order to get through cards. I was trying to find something I could do. So next up was Fixer, and once again Fixer had a big turn. She had already committed to a paying tribute card last turn. So she basically picked out the last suspect that she could get to down at the bottom, and removed it, and used the evidence tampering trait to place another suspect. So first of all, this was basically attacking Salandra's suspects and gaining ground myself, but it also allowed me to commit to a second paying tribute card. So even though they're both in play at the same time, they were played in on different activations and different reveals. So there are 2 of those committed to at this point, and they would only be scored if I was able to play a suspect beside Black Mask. So how would I do that? So I used the resource on the Recovering the Juice card, which says when placing a friendly suspect, you may instead choose to place it in contact with another friendly model. So the way that reads is that it's not changing to the friendly model that you're placing in contact with is placing the suspect. It is still the same model doing the placing that is doing the action. It's just placed in a far off land. So effectively, Fixer was able to place a suspect counter in contact with Black Mask, and that scored both copies of Paying Tribute because they both trigger when you place a suspect within 4 inches of a friendly boss. So we'll double up on our last 2 activations of the game. LexCorp, who had sort of sat about, ironically, was then bought the I'm not paying you to sit around black market equipment at the start of his activation. He gains 2 move and free effort, so effectively that gave him the range to get up to the pinched mobster event marker and push it back in to score that. I then used the program resource to pull Ollie a little closer to Black Mask. I was basically digging for my last copy of Message Job at this point because I knew it was in there somewhere to try and at least get some more points on the board. I think the points that we had scored were close at this point, and I just wanted to sort of make a good show of it. So eventually, on Black Mask activation, I used the Pain and Money card to give him a blood damage, but give him 2 attack markers, which then eventually pulled Message Job into my hand, which was like right at the end. So basically, it was, if I hadn't got that at that point, it wouldn't have made any difference what I did. Picked up the Venom Dose, ate the Venom Dose, walked over to Ollie, basically mullered Ollie with the tools, did Did 8 damage because Ollie effectively was -2 on his defense rolls because he only has one arm, and because he was scared from Fright's glower earlier in the round. So Ollie went down like a sack of spuds, and that allowed me to score my message job. That was the end of the game. That was the end of the game, so let's look a little bit at how the scoring went down in the recount phase. So, Salandra's side, that mainstay of Snitch, scoring that third copy. Valuable commodities, once again, fairly uncontestable with Huntress. Just wasn't an option to attack her. As I said, she spent most of her time just at the deployment zone. Non-lethal ammo you saw where Ollie shot Fright. So the secure the perimeter is the interesting one, and it's not interesting because you've seen it scored a couple of times this game, but it's interesting because of how it ended up in Salandra's hand. So at the end of the game, there were only 5 cards in her hand and deck and spent resources pile that were left, not scored or not already committed to. Whenever Black Mask hit Ollie, he has Steal and the Interrogation trait on his card. So effectively, there's 2 things that he can do to try and remove cards from your hand and put them either into your discard pile, which is the Steal, or into your objective deck, which is the Interrogation. Normally that's good because you can take cards that people want to use and ping them away so they'll never get to use them. So especially in this last turn, if it goes into the spent resources, it's never coming back. But in this situation, because the objective deck was completely empty, anything that I took out of Salandra's hand to make her discard was going to come back right into her hand. Anything that I put into the resource pile was going to get shuffled into her hand at the point before shuffled into her objective deck before cards are scored, so she was able to draw up to 4 again. So effectively, there was no way mechanically for me to remove a card from her hand that she wasn't going to be able to score. So I was looking at one of those secure the perimeters to try and keep that out of her hand, but there was no way that I could possibly keep it out. So normally Interrogation and Steal really nice whenever there are cards left in the deck, but in this case, very corner case, I guess. Very frustrating that it had no effect whatsoever. That all said, I had a very productive last turn, managing to finish off quite a few things that had set in motion earlier in the game in terms of the Pinch Mobster, the valuable commodities, one of the paying tributes. Managed to remove 2 people as casualty, getting 2 message jobs, another paying tribute, and scoring the Recovering the Juice. All in all, that unfortunately wasn't enough. It did bring me to a total of 30, but Salandra had scored 37 in a 7-point victory for Team Arrow. So just thoughts about the game overall. Organised Crime, I'm still getting used to. Obviously, a bit better scoring this time. I think the new miniatures helped, and being a little bit more used to the deck. I will say, and I said it at the start, the deck is a little bit counterintuitive. I know some things do chain really well off each other, and obviously you're rewarded with the black money, but I am really still looking at ways to sort of mix and match a little bit to find a better way. There just wasn't any early scoring, and that really irks me whenever I look at the scoreboard after turn 2. If you look at it, it's 3 to like 25 or something ridiculous, or something maybe 17 or something like that on Salandra's side. That's just an insurmountable, even though I was able to score 27 points in the last 2 rounds, it's really, really insurmountable to expect her not to score any points at all in order to surpass that. So I'm looking at ways to sort of maybe sub something out to take out, to sort of more hone the direction of the crew as well. I think as much as it kind of pains me, it does feel like the crew, maybe not having to be led by Black Mask, but a lot of these new Black Mask thugs are just better than the ones in suits. They just have more to do. They have special actions, they have better guns, that sort of thing. They have a good bit more speed, which helps them get across the board. Probably wouldn't take the Lexicor Trooper again. I definitely have ideas. I want to figure it out. On the Team Arrow side, I was impressed that a non-Titans 5-person crew could get it done. But I will say, there's so much passive scoring, especially whenever you even mix in the Birds of Prey stuff. There's just, you can just get so much from so little. You know, there was no need to come at me except to place 2 suspects to score 3 copies of in position. And you saw that Sandra didn't have to come out of her little area. And my little slow guys had to be forced by the dual marker around things to get anywhere near. And even then, Fright is the furthest forward, and she hasn't even passed the middle point of the board, pretty much. It just, you know, it's too easy to score the likes of Snitch and stuff like that. Yes, there are definitely ways to cancel that. Yes, I probably need to consider taking those things. But whenever you're trying to score points, sometimes it's not always considering, well, how can I do 14 tricks to just cancel a 3-pointer that could just be scored the turn after. So we'll move on to the MVPs of both crews. We always like to do our non-scientific MVPs. I had a discussion about it, and Salander, with such an elite crew of 5 miniatures, it really did come down to the teamwork and what everybody chipped in. And I agree, I think everyone did chip in a good amount. I think Salander did say the most fun she had probably was with Huntress. Huntress is that threat, that acrobat movement. You know, she had the freedom to sort of flit about the place and still, you know, almost, as she said, almost scored her Vendetta card. But definitely contributed with the suspect game as well. You know, I'm pretty certain she scored at least one of the diehards or diehard plus on her at some point during the game as well. And yeah, just got that that fear factor, I guess, with that horrible gun. For me on my side, the heavy lifting was, and that's a pun intended, was done by Fixer. She revealed so many suspects, left them up off the board, scored, you know, 2 recovering the juices, 2 paying tributes, the loot, just basically. There's even more there that I didn't really get the use out of as well. You know, she really does open up this crew, and as much as it's good to have her in the crew, she feels auto-include, and I don't like choices being auto, but you know, I don't see a reason why I wouldn't want to take her every single game. She's not even all that expensive, and she keeps herself alive by throwing damage off to everybody else. I really wanted to enjoy my game from Fright. You know, as you can see, I put every effort into trying to use her abilities at every turn. It just didn't come off. Now, I know this is against an elite list with a higher overall willpower, and I did make the mistake whenever I, you know, did the first Inspire Fear on Black Canary, where I didn't stack the Fixer's willpower debuff. But, you know, I suppose it's the same thing I always say. If I'm leaning into dice, I'm probably doing the wrong thing. She does bring that ability to, you know, buff up henchmen, and given a different deployment type, I definitely wanted to create the 2 bubbles. I probably would potentially look to bring a 10-man crew in the future, and switch up things and try and secure a bit more early scoring, a bit more suspect play, to sort of give myself that platform to attack the opponent from. But there we go. Yeah, Fixer was really good. I wouldn't ever leave her out of the Organised Crime list. So there we have it, folks. That was a very interesting game, which basically accelerated no end from about turn 2 onwards. I guess that's what Organised Crime are about, setting up opportunities like that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the game. We have many more on the YouTube channel that you can go and check out. It's in this playlist. Please go and subscribe, like the video, and if you don't know enough about Batman to play it itself, we have a Learn to Play series. You can go through each step of the pre-game, you know, creating a crew, all those bits and pieces, how objective cards work, etc. We also have some think pieces on game theory around how to, you know, be better, how to use objective cards to the fullest, use every opportunity. And we also take a look lightheartedly at the types of miniatures and what they all can do. So some of the bigger players in the Batman universe, we look to break down how good each miniature is. So you can check out those series on our channel as well. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time on Gotham City Knights.